Good morning. That's pretty good. Second day begins. So Ecolab is very pleased to be sponsoring this keynote speaker. And I think, the second day we've all kind of settled out and very excited to hear what Dr. Pyke has to tell us. And hopefully I have success with Flipper. We're very pleased to be part of the SPLC because sustainability is really central to what we see as our corporate purpose, and that's really protecting people and vital resources like water and energy and other natural capital. So our vision is always to be the global leader in water, hygiene, and technologies and services. And you may or may not heard, but we had a big acquisition. I think it's about 2 years ago now. So I started when we were just in healthcare, food service, and lodging. But now we have markets all across a broad swath of industry, and it includes, in addition to the first two, food and beverage processing, light industry, heavy industry, and energy services. The beautiful thing about this is that we can leverage technologies like water, antimicrobial technologies, our dispensing systems and solutions, as well as sustainable solutions. And we tested this before, but it works so much better from the back. Maybe it's a different flipper. There we go. Water management, antimicrobial technologies. Maybe I'm not pressing hard enough. But we can take technologies that we develop and leverage them across these broad industries. So it gives us a lot of capital and power to invent new things. But it's also important, new technologies do nothing if you don't have people to implement them properly and work with our customers. So we have over 25,000 highly trained field associates to help our customers implement these solutions. So we have 19 global technology centers where innovations can happen. We make our products at 135 plants, and we do business in about 171 countries. So they asked me to mention, why we support the mission of SPLC, and it's really very foundational. This process of really looking at, strategically how we can have an impact is really important and foundational to, I think, making a difference. So this process of analyzing, documenting, planning, implementing, and measuring is kind of central to the way that we do business. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Chris Pyke. He said that I could abbreviate this, but I think I really am even more interested to hear the presentation now that I've read the bio in detail. So I'm not going to abbreviate anything. So Dr. Pyke is the Chief Operating Officer for GRESB, an industry-driven organization committed to assessing the sustainable performance of real estate portfolios around the globe. So I didn't know that before. Dr. Pyke is Vice President of the U.S. Green Building Council and Chief Operating Officer for GRESB. He helps lead GRESB's global business strategy and the development of information technologies to inform and accelerate market transformation, including the Green Building Information Gateway. Dr. Pyke is on a number of technical advisory roles, including, and this I think is really interesting, representing the United States for greenhouse gas mitigation issues related to residential and commercial buildings on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Working Group number 3. He's chair of US EPA's Chesapeake Bay program on the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. So believe it or not, there's more. This is before joining GRESB. He was Vice President for Research at US Green Building Council, and I think we're all hoping to leverage his insights as we kind of leverage what USGBC did for SPLC. He was the National Director of Climate Change Services for CTG Energetics and a research scientist at US EPA's Global Change Research Program. While serving at US EPA, Dr. Pyke co-chaired the US Climate Change Science Program's Interagency Working Group on Human Contributions and Response to Climate Change. He's an adjunct faculty member at George Washington University, teaching the Graduate Sustainable Urban Planning Program, and he holds a PhD and MA in Geography from University of California, Santa Barbara, and BS from the College of William and Mary. So it's my great pleasure, and I'm very excited to listen to this presentation and introduce Dr. Chris Pyke.
All right. Hi, thank you. All right. Okay. So with all that out of the way, so I have three purposes with you this morning. So over the next half hour, it's early, and so I'm going to try to get us ramped up into a day of talking about something that I'm passionate about, but I would imagine some of us may have a little challenge getting passionate about rating systems and market transformation at 8:30 in the morning. Although maybe not, but just on the off chance that's true, we're going to work on that. And so what I want to do over the next half hour is really tell you a three-part story. First, I want to give you a quick history, as Christina was talking about what was the experience of the relevant history of the green building movement up to this point. Getting to and what I want to do is offer that to you in the spirit of, in the discussions you guys have this afternoon, that we have together this afternoon, that we maybe can jump over and not reinvent some of the wheels. So let's understand how we got here, and so that we can move forward from this point. We'll take some essential observations about how green building market transformation has worked over the last 20 years. And what I hope I'm going to do is tee up some fundamental questions for you about what does it take to develop, operate, implement an effective market transformation instrument, of which a rating system is just that. So let's start from the beginning, in a sense. So I want to start with our motivation, just to make sure that we're on the same page. For me, this is our problem. We exist in a world where our built environment essentially are shades of gray. We don't know much about them. They are basically shades of less bad or I don't know. And our goal is to put in place a set of tools so that we end up with shades of green. Essentially, I don't need everything to be rainbows and unicorns floating off the Earth's surface, zero net energy, but by God, it has to be more than an opaque shades of gray that we have today. So our mission is one of great practicality, urgency, and it is global in scope. Okay, so starting off with that's where we are, let's talk about how we got here, because I think some of that is instructive. But before I talk about buildings, I want to talk about cars, because I think many of us, what we are doing today in the world of buildings is actually maybe easiest to understand with our visceral experience with automobiles. And so here is an automobile. This is not mine. Mine is red. But let's talk about cars, and let's talk about Toyota when we think about the idea of a rating system. First, when we think about an assessment, one of the things that may come to mind when you're driving your Prius or your Ford C-Max or whatever you got going on, you have at your disposal quite a nice assessment system there on the dashboard. It is a real-time rating system and feedback structure, whether it gives you little green leaves or little whatchamacallums, one way or the other, the goal is to inform drivers about their real-time fuel efficiency and performance and give them the feedback at that moment in time to drive the car better, right? So my dashboard on my Prius is a tool, a decision support tool, to assess performance and guide me toward better decision making if I choose to do that, which some days when the kids are late for school maybe is a lesser priority. So on the other hand, when I go to buy that car, that same decision support tool, that assessment process, that little dial-y gizmo is not a decision support tool, it is a feature. So when I go to that window sticker, the fact that the car has a real-time driver assessment and feedback system is not a tool. I'm doing a different action. I'm not driving the car. I'm trying to get me to buy the car, and that ends up as one of many items on this list. And so what I'm trying to do with this is inform the purchase decision and say that you're going to buy this car because the car has that feature, along with cloth seats and airbags and whatever else I'm offering you, right? So I'm informing buyers about model features, and an assessment becomes a feature of the model. Okay, that makes sense. And if I'm Toyota, I don't actually care about the thing on the dashboard, and actually I don't even care about the thing on the window sticker. I care about how many Priuses I move versus how many Tundras I move versus how many Camrys. And what I'm reporting to my investors and my stakeholders is my aggregated fleet-wide performance. Okay, so the reason I share this with you is because when we talk about assessment, we often talk about it as if it is just kind of one granular thing. But the reality is, for the complex organizations that we live and work in and are surrounded by, assessment means a lot of things. The question is, who is the user of the assessment? What is the decision you are trying to influence? Who are you communicating with? Are you communicating with the driver to take their foot off the gas? Are you communicating with the buyer to buy this product because it has superior attributes? Or are you communicating with an investor to say, buy me because our stuff on average is better? 3 separate levels of assessment, ideally coordinated, vertically integrated, and able to be articulated and understood. That's not always the case. So in our case, our story about buildings, we don't have what the auto industry has. Although we got a lot of buildings, and we've been doing buildings for, going on 100,000 years now, we have not reached the level of sophistication that I just conveyed. But over the last 2 decades, we are trying. And so let me talk about where the building industry is, again, in the spirit of saying this is a jumping off point for the tools that you guys are going to be building in our conversations this afternoon. First, we have the eco-labels that we have come to understand. So we have, instead of a thing on the dashboard of a Prius, we have eco-labels, we have labels and rating systems that are designed to influence project teams to make better decisions. Ultimately, when we go back to the beginning, what is a LEED certification trying to do for a building? It is trying to influence the conversation around a project team table to lead to a superior building. It is trying to empower the person who is sitting there across from the person who has other priorities to give some reason to make that building more energy efficient, to help them to win the argument to specify a more sustainable product, to put in those low-flow water fixtures when the other person says no. It is a tool. It is a tool to guide a decision. Just like taking your foot off the gas, a rating system is a tool fundamentally to win a conversation around a shabby little conference table somewhere. And today, that family of tools is growing. So we have LEED, and what's happening is our tools are becoming more specialized and more granular. So in the last year, the greater US GBC, Green Building Certification Institute universe, we are now certifying PEER. We are now certifying well buildings based on their health benefits. PEER is a microgrid rating system, and Sustainable Sites is a landscape rating system, and there are many more on the way. What I take from that is there are many tools, each trying to take a specific problem set, communicate in these cases to a new construction team, an existing building team, a commercial interior team, a neighborhood team, and push them toward something better. Okay, so what are we doing with these? We are looking at projects, and by projects I would call them moments of opportunity. We are the drivers in that moment, and we are pushing them to do something better that they would not do in the absence of the tool. Right? Okay, what are the fundamental things about these tools? One, each of this growing universe of tools, and I obviously shared with you the GBCI set of tools, but if we go around the world, there are hundreds of these tools, as you guys know. Each of them says a language. They provide a language to define green and provide specific guidance on best practices. It is their value as a common language. I can go to Shanghai or Mumbai or Glasgow, and if I talk about EA Credit 2 in LEED NC 2009, Chrissy's like already got the whole thing in her head, but that means something. You can communicate what that means in project teams all over the place. And I know what it means when you achieved it. Second, they provide specific measures of achievement and performance. it's not just I said I did something good. This codifies it in some way that is actually reproducible. And it's a framework for verification. I don't think we talk about that enough, right? We all trust each other, especially early on. But if sustainability matters, it's got to be more than you said you did it. Because we've tried that before, right? How did it work when we said, I would like a mortgage, and I'm going to just tell you what I make? Right? If it matters enough to have someone check your homework. What would it be like if I went to Harvard and said, yeah, I read all the syllabus online, and I did the whole thing, and I don't really feel like taking that final exam. That's kind of a waste of time. But I've done all the work. Scout's honor. Okay, so verification matters, but you can only verify something to which you have provided a specific language, specific performance indicators, and you can't do the third without the first two. Okay, so I think I beat that horse into the ground. It's also important to recognize the motion of the ocean in this particular thing. We have this language, but we also understand we're trying to bring that closer to that Prius dashboard, closer to how do I inform the team in real time. One of those manifestations is something that USGBC calls the lead dynamic plaque. What does it really mean? And the only point I want to make about it here is saying what this means is it is an arc from green as an event, green as a one-time thing, as something you did, toward green as a condition, a status, a dynamic status, something you live. And that transition from green as an event, like I was born, that's an event. Green is how I'm living this particular moment. That's what the dynamic plaque is about. And that's not so much it's a question of where we are in that arc. The question that the arc goes in this direction is not really a question. How quickly we get to that mode, that's the question. Okay. So make a transition. So let's come up and scale. So at this moment, I've got lots and lots of labels, more every day, more specialized, more granular. They share certain fundamentals. Second thing is, I need a tool to pull those observations together on a unit of decision. So I make a decision, not if you and me, if we own this asset, we own this convention center, we own the office building across the street, a LEED certification is but one event in the multi-decade lifetime of that asset, or the multi-year lifetime that I make that investment. So how do I understand the sequence of observations? If I have certifications, awards, case studies, municipal disclosures, things I say about my project, things you say about my project. Okay, so we have a tool for that. We call it the Green Building Information Gateway. It is a tool to score, compare, and aggregate information at the level of a building or an asset. And in your head, you're probably going, isn't a green building and a building? No, we got that wrong. We convince people that a project and a building are the same thing. As practitioners, we have to unbake that particular cake. A project is an event at a point in time. A asset, a thing that is composed of many of those things. So we have a tool for that. We had to invent that tool after we unbaked that cake in our mind and understood that a project is not a building. I would encourage you not to bake that cake. Okay, what does it mean? What are we trying to do? We understand that an asset is a unit of assessment. A building is a unit. And today, that unit we're aggregating many lines of evidence. We don't have the luxury. If you were in real estate 30 years ago, you said nothing about your assets. That was strategy number one. Then you decided to control the information entirely. That's strategy number two. But today, you don't have that luxury. People are talking about you, they're talking about your stuff, they're talking about it in real time. So your choice is to participate or withdraw. So this here, many sources of information, certifications, awards, disclosures, and what we want to do is use that information, something that Christina said in the introduction. How do we celebrate the people, organizations, products, and services that are contributing to the good stuff? The buildings that have multiple awards, certifications, disclosures, performance. How do we do that? Okay, we want to do that at scale. And this is what it looks like. So just to give you a quick snapshot, this is the Empire State Building, a building we all know. This building is not green because it has any single certification. The Empire State Building is not green because its owner says it's green. It is green because of a track record, a 10-plus year track record of 25 different green building activities, including certifications, awards, public disclosures, case studies, and other labels. That's a green building sustained over time heading in the right direction. Multiple lines of evidence converging to indicate that this asset is green. Okay. So investors don't invest in generally, with notable exceptions. Most institutional investors, when we talk about communicating to a different audience, this is up to that Toyota scale. We invest not just in a single building, we invest in portfolios of buildings, and we're not interested in just the Priuses. We're interested in the Priuses and the Tundras and the others, and so we have a tool for that. Today we call it GRESB, okay? So GRESB, Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, is a new kind of assessment, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to assess and benchmark the aggregation of activities specifically for the purpose of communicating it to sources of investment capital, equity capital, okay? So what we've done here is have a set of tools. The fundamentals are take that transparency at the level of assets, aggregate it into portfolios, and give it to investors in a way that they can understand. Attributes and performance, and to provide tools for comparative analysis. How good is that real estate fund against its peers? Because that's how, obviously, our investors think. They live in a finite, kind of Pareto-optimal world, right? They're going to choose, they have to put their money in the game, and they're going to choose the best available. So what we've done through this stack is be able to help investors go all the way from a single certification to thousands of assets to hundreds of funds to which institutional investors are ultimately going to plunk their money into. And what they want to know is, am I really good? Is the fund I'm investing on an ESG basis in the upper right or the lower left? Those are the questions we can support. And so fundamentally, what we've done together, the state of the green building movement today, is we have tools to define green buildings based on their achievements and their performance. We have tools to celebrate the individuals and organizations who got them that way, and we are trying to be increasingly specific about how we communicate and analyze. Okay, let's take 2 steps back. That's the state of the world that I live in today. It's the state of the world that you can draw some lessons from as you think about the next generation of rating tools. Second, let's talk about some of the 2 things. One is, what are some of the guiding principles underpinning that movement as it is right now? And what are some quick observations we can make? First off, let's start with concepts. Green building, ultimately, everything I just shared with you, shares the idea that green building is a tool to address market failure. If markets worked, if markets were working, and by working I mean they had the information to rationally allocate capital, we would not need green building. Certification, as we understand it, provides the transparency and competitive differentiation markets need to function properly. And effectively, what green building did over the last decade was create a new superior asset class that could be available for investment or repositioning of assets. That's what green building, all those tools are dedicated to this purpose. And what we're trying to do, in the words of kind of Paul Hawken, as a movement like yourselves, dedicated to raising the bar on its own members. You know, what a wacky trade association that basically, that's not how the trade associations normally work, right? We don't normally work that way. Well, we raise our bar and we're asking how, over time, we can shift the distribution of practice in a systematic way to yield higher levels of performance for people in the environment, right? So there's one thing I would have you take from this. We are not a movement predicated under doing it all at once. To Christina's point, we are a movement predicated under a ratcheting upwards, a continuous improvement and iteration cycle. We're not that once and done movement. And moreover, just in case you missed it, it's never done. You don't get done with this movement. There is continuously something better to do. Okay. What is our one and only core competency? Transparency. Really. At the end of the day, that's it. We are a movement that is trying to do that on the back of providing transparency about the environmental and sustainability attributes of real estate, something that 20 years ago we could not do. So we are doing nothing any more profound than this box of animal crackers with a label on the side. And the fact that you and I still don't have this transparency means our work is not even nearly done. What do we do with that transparency? Why is transparency the secret sauce, the fundamental superpower of the green building movement? Because if you're like me, you find a curve like this endlessly interesting. So what this curve is we believe that essentially is an article of faith, irrespective of all data. Data comes later. That there exists a distribution of practice in the industry, that there are certain bleeding edge innovators, there are certain market leaders, there's a predominance of practice, and that is otherwise invisible to the market. And if we put tools into the market to make it visible, people will act rationally and receive competitive differentiation and advantage for where they are. That this curve is hidden in plain sight, and it is the role of our rating systems to bring it out, to create advantage for these, disadvantage for those. Yes, we're in the disadvantage business too. And the audacity of our movement is that we are trying to do it over dozens and dozens of issues at the same time. Just, by the way, one of these issues, like if you're, our friends at like Alliance to Save Energy, they just got one. Just one of these curves. That's enough to launch a movement. But the green building movement is predicated under transforming all dozens of issues at the same time, whether it's energy efficiency to solar panels to procurement to waste management to water efficiency. Woo! And we're doing it across dozens of space types, hundreds of performance dimensions, and we're trying to do it in thousands of markets which are at different stages of evolution. So we go to New York City and they go, oh, this is old news. And you go to Peoria and they go, what are you doing to us, right? That's our reality. And that's obviously the reality we share. Okay. So a couple of observations. So based on that theory alone is interesting. That's fine. But the thing is, it works. And I want to show you some data that says it works. It would be fine if I didn't be fine if I stopped here and said, this is how it, but I can do better. Okay, and we understand, not only does it work, but the result is better buildings for people in the environment, and we understand that need to evolve over time in an empirical way. So I want to give you a few empirical examples. First off, all right, so I like this. So for our LEED certification, there is no smoking on the winery premises. Okay, I don't know what to make of that on a couple different levels, but if that's what it took to get you to ban smoking on your winery, God bless you. The reason I put it in here is that it's funny what motivates people, but it's also good to remember that smoking was actually the original green building story. Of all the things we're known for, one of the first things that green building did was ban smoking in LEED certified buildings. And that led to the first original round of massive backlash against these greeny leftists or whatever we were. And so, but at the same time, now, thinking back 15 years, it just doesn't seem like a big deal. Like, right, to not smoke in a commercial building, to not smoke around a commercial building. This is not a big deal, but if it took the green building to be part of a larger movement, to move that idea forward, to overcome industry opposition to the idea of banning smoking, okay, been there, done that. We have an overarching theory of change, and that theory of change basically says is four parts. One is by asking for reporting, asking people to tell. What we are doing is empowering people to evaluate products, i.e. buildings, interiors, whole neighborhoods, and hopefully have preferential selection. I want you to select the good stuff. Note that this breaks down whenever we stop, breaks down if any of these don't happen. Preferential selection, i.e. the fact that people are preferring the better stuff, guides innovation within the supply chain, and that innovation wants to be told so it generates more reporting. So we think this is how the world works. Let's talk about how that actually does work. So when we started, in the we in this case is the LEED universe, we started with targets on specific chemicals of concern. I know this is where you guys are really familiar with this. And saying, okay, we are going to go after VOCs. We're going to go after certain kinds of wood. We're going to go after certain labels for products. Okay, what was neat is that these were single attributes in a limited set of the life cycle, okay? And why did we do that? By God, it was not because we didn't know that we should be doing LCA. Just to be clear, in case you're one of the folks who, we got it, we know, but it wasn't that we didn't know that we wanted to assess the entire life cycle in a holistic way. But we had to start somewhere, as Christina said, iterative, incremental, stepwise. So we stepped into single attributes, limited part of the life cycle. And that created markets for low VOC paint. green cleaning products and carpet products. Okay, so again, the proof is in that it works, not just the theory. And just to honor the fact that we've been dealing with these controversies for a long time, the answers are not always clear. So we, back in 2005, 2006, and 2007, we were already dealing in the throes of vinyl, good or bad. And the answer, the very unsatisfying answer, it depends. Thus, there is no specific guidance on vinyl, right? So it's not that we don't get it, it's that the answer is actually legitimately complicated, which is, okay. So, back to the fact that it works for a second. And you guys all have to buy Christina a beer because she can talk about that story better. But the issue is, okay, so how do we know it works and what do we do when it's working? So green cleaning is a perfect example. So how is a rating system supposed to work in a context of something like green cleaning? So going back to 2002, on the vertical thing here, what we have is a number of products in the market that have green cleaning qualities, right? So basically, the things that we'd recognize as non-toxic green cleaning agents. And so back in 2002, 2003, those products were rare. So to stimulate that market, we put a credit, an optional credit into the field saying, we will give you an incentive to use those products. Come 4 years later, the number of products in the marketplace that people could choose from, and consequently the price differential, the options had gone up, the price differential had gone down, and we made it a prerequisite. This kind of adoption curve helping the market make this transition, going from a few products, at which point we're not going to be heavy-handed, we're going to push and nudge and encourage, to once there are a lot of choices in the market, putting it down and saying, yeah, a green building has green cleaning. That's what it's supposed to look like, right? Okay, so we can go beyond that, though. We can also put some data. Once we put a prerequisite in the field, it has this great quality. It means that essentially everybody has to do it. So this is my most boring graph of the presentation, but the next slide is less boring. But what I wanted to show is that this is the achievement rate of the green cleaning policy prerequisite for LEED for existing buildings. It has this great quality. It's 100%. Okay, that's fun. And you guys who are thinking about rating system development are thinking that's fun. The problem with prerequisites is that everybody who couldn't do that doesn't get to play. So be careful, because they're fun, they're powerful, but if you don't have that first part, if you don't have the availability of options and the price competitively, you can't do this fun thing. The thing with the fun thing, though, is you do get to see hundreds of actual projects do it. So this is a map of those projects with those policies and actual things on the ground happening, which is cool. So what we do is we continue to raise the bar. So in this case, this is a more ambitious level. This is green cleaning source control. And what I wanted to show you on this one is this is a credit. So we are still asking the market to go further. And what I want to show you is this kind of sawtooth sort of pattern. What we're doing is we're asking the market to go further, and by using a multi-tier rating system, sort of certified, silver, gold, and platinum, we are getting higher levels of compliance. Certified, silver, gold, platinum, going from 0 toward 100, and that we consistently see that ability both over time to encourage the market to rise and in a multi-tier rating system, allow that market to climb upwards, okay? So there's two things I'd like to emphasize here for you. One is think strategically about how you're engaging the market and bringing them on a stepwise journey at multiple timescales. You're doing it year over year, and you're doing it within the levels of the rating system. And can you make it? Can you track it? Can you show it? Can you make that map? Can you make that graph? Will you be able to make that graph, make that map 2, 3, 5 years from now? Okay. Let's go one level deeper. So just to underscore, partially because this is where I know many of you guys live, our evolution is not complete in this. We started with single attributes when it comes to materials, and we managed to drive change in green cleaning, change in VOCs. Today, we're going deeper. And so the evolution of this is recognizing that we want to have transparency in every product, pushing into the products, dealing not just with single attributes, but with a palette of health hazards things like health product declarations or EPCs, and bringing in more explicit life cycle thinking. Oops, it's one more, there we go. Okay, what I want to leave you with is that while 10 years ago, we started this journey with single products and single attributes, one at a time, working through the supply chain, generating results. Today, after that experience, the market is ready for this, maybe. Well, actually, that's why it's so great. Is the market ready? The market always says we're not ready. But can we objectively look at the market and say, can they be ready? Yes. After 10 years of work, they are ready. They are ready for more transparency. They are ready to deal with health and the environment simultaneously. And they are ready to do it across the life cycle. We can say that they weren't ready 10 years ago, and that wasn't a cop-out. It wasn't a cop-out. They weren't ready. But are they ready now? Can they be ready now? Yes. Okay, so next. I wanted to offer you guys 5 what I think are fundamental considerations as you think about the notion of a rating system for purchasing. And you guys have these incredibly useful guidelines, but as you start turning this corner to a rating system of some kind, what are 5 things that I might, these are not the only 5 things, but there are 5 things that I think you should think about. I want to work through them in a second. Some of them, they fall into 2 categories. One is things that are tensions, things that there is no right answer. There is just a dynamic tension. And things that are trends. So where are we going that is different than where we were 10 years ago? So I would challenge you to think about not designing a rating system from 2002, but designing a rating system that is respectful of some of these tensions we'll talk about in a second, and also responsive to some of the lessons learned, the trends in the industry. So let's start from the top. Assessment versus leadership. What do you want to do? Do you want, and this is a tension, do you want to assess the quality of something, or do you want to reward leadership? These are not the same. Lead splits the middle. Lead says, I'm going to make an assessment about how you got to work, and I'm going to reward you for using low VOC paint, all right? So the assessment is something I can compare project 1 to project 2, how many commuting trips. It's an assessment of sort of commuting activity. Leadership is different. Leadership is how far out on that curve are you? Rating systems tend to want to split the difference and do both at the same time. What you end up with is confusion. And that's not necessarily bad, but when you look at a LEED plaque on a building, what is that confusion? Is it an assessment that this particular building here and now is great? Or it is an assessment about how far off on that curve could I get you to go? How much of a leader are you? There are very few examples of being able to simultaneously navigate that. That's really a challenge. Assessment warrants simplicity, it's not judgmental, it's metric driven. Leadership is about how far out and how fast I can have you go. That's a tension. There's no simple answer. Second, this issue of event versus status. When you do an assessment, is that an assessment a one-time condition like my 41st birthday? Like an event that will never happen again? Or is it a status like I can run a 5-minute mile, which I may be able to do today, but I might not be able to do tomorrow, or probably couldn't do today either. So which is it? And I would tell you, as a trend, the market wants to appreciate events. Events matter. But clearly, the interest in assessment is towards status. How are you doing today over a bounded time window? That's the dynamic plaque world. We want that assessment to be more time-bound, more up-to-date, and less event-driven. That's the thought. Next, eco-label versus score. We're down in the weeds here. Eco-label versus score. When I have a score, like in GRESB, I present investors with a relative number, a 0 to 100 or something like that. An eco-label says, I'm green, I'm LEED Platinum. Okay, eco-labels serve a purpose. They are simple to communicate. But often what the market is looking for is comparative scores. The problem is what you're going to hear is the market wants both. They want both. They want a simple badge and they want a rich score. and it drives you nuts. But that's an irreducible driving of nuts. That's a tension. They are both good things, but the question is, what do you want to provide to the market? And they are two very different things. And second and third, I'll go quickly here. Rules versus benchmarking. This is a subtlety. There is a rules, a lead rating system is a scorecard full of rules. It says, if you do this, you get this point. If you get enough of these points, you get a plaque. All right, what's awesome about rules is your actions are independent from my actions. I don't need to worry about what the world's doing to understand how much credit I get. That's awesome. That's highly predictable. The problem is that a lot of how much credit answer is relative. If I go run a running race, and whether I am first or not matters greatly. So my ability to control that my ability to win is relative to the entire rest of the universe. And there is no amount of, I can't go out by myself, run a running race, and say that I won the race, right? It is intrinsically a benchmark, right? However, these things, the trend is to offer benchmarking versus rules. I'm going to put a caveat on this. So what I mean by that is saying, how good are you relative to your peers? That's how GRESB works, and GRESB in that way is an innovation in the green building industry. I know some of you guys are involved in that in the supply chain. Is this the best product available? Here's the problem you're going to run into. Over time, people want the predictability of rules. They say they want a benchmark because they want to say, I'm the best in the market. But when it comes to using something, rules are a lot easier to live with. So although I put it as a trend because it is a trend, when you talk to people, they want benchmarks, they want comparisons. But actually, after they live with benchmarks for a couple of years, they want to go back to rules. So let's, so last one, process versus performance. We have a trend, but I've put it up here as a tension, between the idea of performance is all that matters. I was on a phone call this morning with someone at a real estate company, and they were making a big case that it doesn't matter at all how we get there, it's just my performance. And we all hear that, maybe we say that. But I will tell you that from where I sit, performance is a sticky subject. And from where I've come to personally, performance without process is luck. The issue is we control process. And if our process is right, we get performance. And just like investing in the stock market, past performance is no indicator of future performance. If you have no process, if you have a bad process, I can't believe that your performance in the next increment will be good regardless of how good it was last time. So listen to this drumbeat about performance. Performance matters. Performance is great. But dig a little deeper and ask yourself, are you looking for today's performance? Is that what really matters? Maybe it is. If it matters right now, today, then performance, God bless it, is the right thing. But if you're looking for performance in the next time period, don't leave process behind. Process is what yields performance in the next time period. Process is what many of us control when we don't control performance. All right, just a thought. So I'm going to wrap this up with this set of aspirations. And this is my last one. So I was trying to convey a visual for this, and I kept coming up with a platypus. It's sort of an animal made by committee. And so what I want to do is give you an aspiration, right? What does it mean to use these principles? Your challenge is to create an assessment system that supports assessment while simultaneously encouraging leadership. To recognize that milestones exist, a product is sold on a certain date, but to also celebrate real-time performance. Provide simple labels and rich scores at the same time. To apply predictable rules and market context, and to embrace process and performance. And to do that without creating a platypus. This is the challenge. And no one else has licked it. So just to put that reality in it, this is the aspiration. Nobody in a world full of 200 plus rating systems and hundreds and hundreds of more ego labels have figured it out. But we do know enough to ask these questions, and you guys are at an incredible inflection point to do something better. All right. With that, there's places to learn more, and I'm looking forward to the chance to work with you guys this afternoon. So thanks. Okay. So I think we have a minute or two for Q&A, and then I'll be around.
Raise your hands. We have folks with mics running around for questions.
Sure. Just go ahead and speak up. Yep.
About what percentage of the market at the starting point should qualify for platinum versus gold versus what, you know. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, that's been a moving target, but I'll give you, the USGBC answer is 6% for platinum. Okay, that's the emergent answer. 6% of the universe is platinum. I think that there is I don't know that there's a rule of thumb beyond that kind of emergent phenomenon. I do think that it's a very thoughtful question in the sense that the evolution of lead, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, has been toward a concentration at gold. And what that's done is effectively turn the rating system more binary than it was in the beginning. That's not necessarily that's debatably not a good thing. Because basically you now have essentially it's gold or bust in major markets. It would probably be useful to have the market have more of a spread, but the market market responds more quickly than the development process to maintain that spread. So platinum is, I think if you had achievement rates much lower than 5 or 6, or much higher than 5 or 6%, you would lose the boutiqueness of it. So we don't have like the rating system actually, sorry, one last thing on that. The rating system is not designed to yield those ratios. I mean, literally, as Christine knows, it's not, that's an emergent thing. So what I find fascinating is that those trends come out of the engagement with the rating system, and it's not so much it's planned in. You think you would work backwards, but it doesn't work that way. Sure.
Thank you. So this is odd because I used to be with EPA and the government, but I'm actually now with a firm that represents the polyvinyl chloride people that were involved with not having an avoidance credit anymore as a requisite to a lead rating. And I think that actually seems like a victory and a good result, because the issue from their perspective was that the folks making polyvinyl chloride, it was going into vinyl roofing and vinyl flooring. Vinyl flooring devised their own NSF sustainability assessment standard. The molecule that was bad doesn't come out, and it has a good end-of-life record, and it's durable, and actually it has low floor score VOC emissions rating, so it was actually a product that California wants in its grade schools and wants in its cafeterias and hospitals. So I think it's a good system where there's that kind of flexibility. And I guess the question is, how can you, because other systems don't permit that necessarily, and I think that's when people start bringing in the Hill and they bring in these other, So what would you recommend would be a way of assuring that when you are devising these kinds of systems, there is enough flexibility to allow, no bright lines, but some, sophisticated arguments?
That's a great comment, and obviously this is, it's a complicated space. Let me answer it 2 different ways. One is the report cover that I flashed up there, this TSAC, this is Technical Science and Advisory Committee report from 2007, I think is actually underappreciated as a milestone for USGBC's thinking, because it was actually super thoughtful, and it basically says pretty much everything we thought about for the next 10 years. And so that I would refer people, if you're thinking about these issues of the complex choices around different kinds of building products and it really breaking it down to a granular level, that report is a useful pile of thinking. To the more general point that you've made, I think that our experience has been, it is a little hard to generalize, but to say that trying to avoid boxing people into a corner with regard to absolutist sort of guidelines and maintaining a sort of respectful flexibility is maybe one of the biggest lessons learned of the last 10 years. Of saying, if it feels enticing, it feels almost like gravity to get into an adversarial relationship around these granules, but I don't think that it, as a rule, has not been a productive way to create a system. And at each point, we've had to go back and break that impasse. And that impasse has been broken with sort of introspection and flexibility. And so so I think to your broader point about flexibility, and the last thing I'll say about that, and I realize it's hard to be concise, is I think one of the challenges we have is we have this idea that products need to evolve to be transparent and healthy and environmentally beneficial. What happens if we're a little bit wrong and we can have great, healthy, environmentally preferred products that just aren't so transparent for all sorts of good reasons? Is that a win? Is that a win? Because it may be the ultimate win. It may be behind the scenes, like you're saying, or even in front of the scenes, we are getting better products. But they are different than the theory of change that we had in mind, which is driven by this transparency. And I think those are one of the things that keeps me up at night going, how do we accept winning on terms that are different than our theory of change? And I think we are winning more than we let on, because we have a certain theory. So anyway, that's worth a cup of coffee, maybe a beer or 2 or 3 to talk about that. Winning, are you really winning when, do you know if you're winning? Sorry, that's a lot of things to unpack there. Please, in the back.
Thank you, of being able to tell that story and help drive the market. But procurement is often, within an organization, information isn't necessarily shared with the marketing sales folks who can then go and tell that story. So what guidance would you have for how we think about that going forward?
That's a great question, and clearly a first order challenge. I'll give you one perspective that we're thinking largely from a GRESB perspective, because what we're trying to do in GRESB, and this I think the way I'll answer your question is kind of going back to this process and performance issue, is what seems useful by leading companies is to create more of this straight line between plans, goals, ambitions, actions, outcomes, and that evaluation. And what I think we see in practice that makes this the behavior that you articulated, we see people taking action that can't be linked clearly back to a plan or a policy or a goal. And so those actions feel random, they feel balkanized, they may feel underappreciated. But the best companies of basically putting it in that, to be simplistic, that plan, do, act, check cycle. How do we do that? And then how do you communicate that both internally and externally? That action is part of a plan, that action reflects a larger goal, and there's an upstream and a downstream. You are part of a continuum. If we can do more of that, make it more transparent internally, more transparent externally, that there is a plan, there's a set of actions, and then reactions, that can increase the motivation. And I'll tell you that one of the clear signs that the absence of that happening is that we end up, as you go down that waterfall, you get further from that thing. These things about purchasing, they get value engineered out. They get substituted. They get changed, because no one when you get to the far right knows why the hell we were doing it to begin with. So more transparency on the process, and it's not the magic answer, but it's an answer. I think I'm being told to do this, to myself. So I'm going to be around. Okay.
Yeah, so everyone, please join me in thanking